śhrī-bhagavān uvācha aśhochyān-anvaśhochas-tvaṁ prajñā-vādānśh bhāṣhase gatāsūn-agatāsūnśh-cha nānuśhochanti paṇḍitāḥ. Shri Krishna, Bhagavan, said, "You have been mourning for them who should not be mourned for. And yet here you are speaking words of wisdom. The truly wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead." This is how Shri Krishna starts his teachings on the Gita. The 11th shloka of the second chapter starts with first removing any wrong notions that Arjuna has about life and death. So here we see that Krishna immediately places before Arjuna the highest truth, and the highest truth is that the wise do not mourn for the living or for the dead. When I use the word mourn here, that is the translation that we generally can at best have from the English language. But what it basically means is being overwhelmed out of attachment and the misery and the burning fire of pain and sorrow that inflicts the soul. Shri Krishna says, you do not need to have that at all. Now here Arjuna was faced with the consequence that would lead to the dying of his relatives. And he was also worried about the consequences of the ones that he would kill and the ones who have already died thereby. Now, what Krishna is trying to tell here is that, listen, Arjuna, here you have these people and that you're afraid that you would have to kill them. And now we shift it, because we shift it from Arjuna's predicament to ours. Arjuna was a Kshatriya and he had to fight his way out and win the battle for dharma. Ours, how do we apply it as spiritual seekers? One of our strongest holds that keep us very much bound to this world is attachment. At one point in our life, we feel pained or we are kind of overwhelmed by losing our near and dear ones. Now, I know it's a matter of fact that even we would go before that. Yet it plagues the soul when we come to this maturity that life is not just about fun and frolic. It is also about living and loving and giving. And when we enter into that evolved state of being from selfishness to unselfishness, then another idea also plagues us. As we purify ourselves, we realize that we have to part with the dear ones. This is the predicament of the soul, the most toughest aspect of human bonding. And we take Arjuna's predicament into us as spiritual aspirants, because the discussion on this subject here is based on our experiences and the application of Gita in our lives. So whenever we see that here is a person, here is my mother, here is my father, here is my brother, here is my wife, here is my child, they're all my friends or my countrymen, they're the ones that I love, and one day they're all going to go. It's a matter of fact. It is a wonder to see that in spite of this being a truth as it is, an undeniable, verified fact of life, yet the heart is overwhelmed. Now, sometimes if we do not have wisdom, we see this as it were, as if it is an end game, but it is not an end game. The purpose of Krishna presenting this to Arjuna is to let him know that his perspective is flawed. The way he looks at this whole thing is flawed. Nature isn't so cruel so as to make you feel bound and then make you feel miserable. It also has a wisdom that is lying at the background of everything for us to explore. It is only to be sought, and when you seek it, you get it. Just like how Arjuna sought it and he got it. Till then we enjoy the ignorance, we enjoy our state of being in an uninformed state of mind. We've got to come out of that. Then when we look at persons, then we see things clearly. Here, yes, there is one that Krishna says that the wise do not grieve for the dead. That is okay. Once one person has passed away, there are many philosophies that you can bring in, and there are greater truths. The greatest truth is that person who you think is not a person, it is the self, it is the Atman. And the Atman never dies. It is not an individual. It was always that great truth that they were. They were the embodiment of the truth, and the truth is imperishable. The truth is the great, undying, undecaying truth. That is what everybody is. And this is what Krishna tried to tell Arjuna, but in very plain language. And as we go further through chapters, we will learn to see that this is what Krishna is trying to communicate to Arjuna. But what about the ones that are living? And that is where, when one is living itself, we've got to change our notions. Usually we allow events to pass and the person passes away, then we take up a spiritual book and then we try to understand perspectives and then we try to have an outlook. No, that is all impermanent. When the person is living, we've got to see it. But unfortunately, when the person is living, we are caught up in the niceties and the feel-good nature of living, where we are in love, we are attached, but it's from a very, very, very human sense. But what you've got to do, what we've got to do, is also have the eye of wisdom. When we are looking at others, we've got to question who they are fundamentally. When I'm looking at somebody, who they are fundamentally, right? And this is a spiritual pursuit. And the spiritual pursuit starts with one's own self. In the process, we learn what others are. So when I look at myself and when I ask, who am I? What is my real nature? What am I made of? What is that in me which is permanent? What is that in me which is impermanent? When I learn all this, then I get a better idea of who I am. And when I get a better idea of who I am, I get a better idea of who everyone else is. Now, this may make us feel like we're looking at life from a very robotic sense. That we're looking at everybody as the Atman and their bodies and minds as some sort of a mechanical entity. It isn't like that at all. This is a corrupt way of looking at things. When one understands the nature of the self to be the substratum of one's own self, then one sees that everything else is nothing but the glory of the self. So you communicate with individuals, it is the expression of the self. You love individuals, but from the standpoint of the self. You realize that the essence of everyone is the self. The beauty of such a perception is that you are no more even limiting the individual that you're looking at. You look at the person, you communicate with the person, but you also know that that person is that great truth. In this, there comes not just love, there comes respect, there comes a sense of awe, a sense of love, true love, for the sake of the Atman. And then you understand that all these things are expressions, the mind, the body, the thoughts, the ideas, the intellect, the emotions, all of them are expressions of the great self. But not knowing the great self is very frightening. And this is what Krishna tries to say. He tries to say that yes, what you would mourn for the ones who are not dead, is the ending of this limited kind of transaction that you held so dear. But then you raise your mind and you see that the transmigration of the soul is eternal. It is always going to happen. Their minds are going to take up newer bodies, but they die not. These are all just expressions of the self. And when you look at it, you transcend from one span of existence to a sense of eternity. And that is the great truth that Krishna presents. As we go to the chapters that are there further on, the shlokas that are further on, we get more and more better idea of what Krishna is trying to say. So never look at it from a negative sense. Though there is a harsh tone to Krishna, he is actually communicating love. He is actually asking you to look at things as they are. He's asking you to look at things from the standpoint of the self, and then you do not mourn. You do not feel sad. Yes, there will be some sort of pain. There will be some sort of attachment that is going to burn out from within and bring in the discomfort. But if you are trained, if we have practiced, if we have seen that the innermost core of every entity is that vast infinite space, beyond the sorrows comes the great acknowledgement of truth. And that acknowledgement of truth is the greatest expression of love, if there ever was to be. So this is basically the little idea or some idea that I'm able to communicate. You can now explore this and see how you would like to expand on this, maybe ask questions and try to have a better understanding of this verse. Thank you.